Okay, well, we can have more people coming in as we go through some of the startup for the webinar. Thank you all for coming. This is, as was mentioned earlier, the 10th of 10 webinar sessions for this webinar series. It's been quite a popular webinar series and very engaged conversations. I hope we can do the same today. I'm Keith Landa, director of our Teaching and Learning Technology Center at Purchase College. I'm also on leave doing work for SUNY, and part of that I'll talk about with the FACT2 Council. And Brian, you want to?
Hi everyone, I'm Brian Cepuran. I'm the VP of D2L Labs at D2L.
So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Both Brian and I have various times when we're going to go out and do some active demos, and so we'll be sharing the screen back and forth. This is, as I said, the last um, topic in our AI and teaching and learning webinar series. This one is more focused on, I mean, we had earlier ones about what is AI, what are some of the pitfalls, how can you set up a syllabus statement, how can you help your students effectively use AI. I wanted to have a session in our workshop series that was focused at faculty and at instructional support staff, looking a little bit at the tools that we can think about using to make our lives easier as we set about building and offering our courses. Come on. So just a little bit about our agenda. I will say a few words about the FACT2 and the AI task group that this webinar series is a part of. Both Brian and I will then talk about some different approaches to using AI tools to help define or think about course modules and learning outcomes. Then we'll reverse the tag team, and I and he will talk about question banks, formative assessment, some of the tools in Brightspace that are coming down the pike or are available now. Some ideas about lesson planning, developing rubrics, tools for research, and hopefully there'll be time for Q&A. And I just want to emphasize that the examples that we give are not going to be exhaustive. I'm certainly not an expert on all the different ways and all the different AI tools that are out there that can be of use to us as faculty. So I encourage you to use the chat to discuss these topics as we're going along. If there are tools that you've used that you find useful, please share. I think we're at a point in this where we can all kind of bootstrap together. And along those same lines, we have set up a community in the SUNY Viva Engage platform that is all around, I forget what the exact name of it is. It is, yes, teaching and learning with artificial intelligence. Everyone who signed up for and or attended these workshops is going to be invited to join that community. It's kind of an opt-in opportunity for us to have a place to share resources, to pose questions, to get feedback from other faculty and instructional support staff who are engaged in this process of thinking about teaching and learning with AI. Just a little bit about the task group and FACT2 in general before I turn it over to Brian to kick us off on learning outcomes and course design. If you're not aware, FACT2 is Faculty Advisory Council on Teaching and Technology. It is an advisory group to the SUNY Provost. It does a number of things, but one thing that it does a lot of is set up task groups to look at different topics around teaching and especially teaching with technology. So there have been task groups in the past on virtual reality, on adaptive learning platforms, on e-portfolios. There's another task group going on right now looking at the learning object repository functionality in Brightspace and how to use it. It was clear that when generative AI really made a big splash on the public scene in the fall of 2022, that this was a topic that faculty were interested in, concerned about, scared to death about. And so May of 2023, FACT2 Council set up an AI task group with a charge that rather than studying this topic for a year and coming out with something to share at the end of the year, um, we needed an initial guide right away. So there was a lot of work last summer to develop this first version of the Teaching and Learning with AI guide that was distributed to all of our campuses. Hopefully, you heard about it on your campus. The task group is now looking at doing a number of things. We have a subcommittee that is updating that initial guide. It's about 3 times the size now. It's got updated, more recent information. There's a group working on a website where we can, again, crowdsource resources from across SUNY around teaching and learning with AI. There is the faculty development subcommittee that I co-chair that's been has mainly put on this webinar series, and all of the recordings from this webinar series is in a playlist on the Center for Professional Development's YouTube channel. And we'll send these slides around so you'll have these links. And what I really want to focus on is going forward, May 21st, as part of or related to the Conference on Instructional Technology, Instruction and Technology that will be taking place at University of Buffalo in that week of May. There will be a day-long symposium from the AI task group looking at different topics around teaching and learning with AI. You can attend in person if you're at CIT or just or in the Buffalo area, but you can also attend virtually, and virtual attendance is free, so there's no charge. I really encourage you to check this out. We'll make sure we get the link into the chat and again, send these slides around. So one of the first topics we wanted to deal with was developing learning outcomes. And Brian, I'll turn it over to you and let me know when you want me to escape out so you can share your screen.
All right, thanks, Keith. So one of the things that large language models can do is they can help you with developing learning outcomes. Now, some things that you want to just be aware of as you are interacting with these models is that some of them will have been trained on specific taxonomies that you might be able to leverage in your prompt. And Bloom's taxonomy is one that I've explored in the past, and it's generally been worked out pretty well. And one of the things that also could work, and again, it would be the model dependent, is you might be able to try other taxonomies. Like you might be able to try, the structure of observed learning outcomes or taxonomy of significant learning. It's something that you just have to try and see if it's getting you the results that you're looking for. If you are generating outcomes for a general course that's that maybe is might be well represented in the corpus of information that trained the large language model, you might be able to get a good set of results with just the course name. But if you can provide more context, more information, you can often get better results. So if you can provide a course description, that can be advantageous in terms of the outcomes that it's generating for you. You can use the large language model to be able to generate outcomes at different levels. So you could have them, you could create course level outcomes. You could also use it to tailor and go and dig deeper into a specific or several specific course level outcomes and create those lower level learning outcomes for use in your course. It's worth noting that the large language model will pretty much always provide results, but they may not be relevant, they may not be well aligned, they may not be good. Um, and the likelihood of getting results that aren't going to match your expectations go up if you're not providing enough details. So if you try something and it really doesn't work, it can often help to provide more information. And should be noted that you should expect there to be mistakes, or hallucinations, as the terminology that they use with large language models, and make sure that you're checking for accuracy and that you're happy with the results before you start using them. On the next slide, I've got two examples that you can see in the slide, and then I've got one that's a little bit too long that's in the notes. That when the deck gets shared out, we can leave that in the notes. And so this is the course that I'm creating outcomes for today, and I'll be using. I'll show a couple of different examples. Actually, Keith, do you mind leaving that on screen just for a little bit longer? I just wanted to talk through the prompt a little bit. So I'll be showing you examples in both ChatGPT and Gemini. So the first one's very simple. Just please identify some useful learning objectives for the course, Introduction to Microeconomics. I've tried to highlight the portion of the prompt that you would change for different courses. We'll see that gets some results. But you can also go a little bit deeper. You can provide. There are guides for many of the different models for how to get better results. And it often can be helpful to provide a goal and a role for the large language model will play, right? So here I'm telling it is a skilled instructional designer, well-versed in creating course level outcomes for undergraduate courses based on the name of the course that is provided. And then I also, based on research that has been done, they have found that being supportive of the large language model can help, right? So, telling it to take a deep breath has an impact, surprisingly enough. And it can also help to engage in sort of a chain of thought exercise where you get it to think through its response step by step. And here, what I'm actually having it do. So here, I'm only providing it a course name, but I'm asking it to generate a description and then use that description in formulating the learning outcomes for the course. What many have found is that by almost like having the large language model represent things in a way that it's generated, it can help actually yield better results for the task that you're giving it. And then the third prompt is more involved, and I'll show that by way of example. And so first, we'll look at my first example. So I've pre-run these prompts, and here I have it in. So here I'm using ChatGPT, and we have that first case where I'm asking it to provide learning objectives for just the course name. And you see it's come up with a list of 10 to start, and it's been very helpful. It's telling me certainly it can do these things for me. So this is sort of that base level output that you could get from ChatGPT. Gemini, it gets a slightly different response. Here it's grouped it based on a higher level grouping, and it still has a number of different outcomes that it has identified for this course. They're okay, like they're a starting point. But let's take a look at the more involved prompts. I think you'll note that the results are a bit better. So this is the prompt where I've asked it to come up with a course description first. Something that can be very helpful if you're working with a large language model. If you ask it to, I'm sort of asking it to explain itself or provide some reasoning for why it's suggesting these things. And the course description is almost like that. It can help to again yield better results and help you to kind of understand the angle that it's going for with certain suggestions. So here it's provided a course description, and then it's provided a set of learning outcomes, and it's even let me know that by the end of this course, students will be able to and kind of do these, and it's come up with 8 particular suggestions. In Gemini, similar sort of response. You'll notice that the results you get from each language model will be a little bit different. And so you do have to tailor your prompt to the model that you're using, and you want to play around with it if you're not getting the results that you really want. Now, it said, there's a The third example is a little bit more complex. So again, I've started out with a description of the role that I wanted to play. I've told it that I'm going to provide additional information, like a course name and a description, and it's going to be formatted in this particular way. So this is still part of the prompt. Like I'm not. This isn't what I'm asking it to do yet. This is me telling it what it can expect from my prompt. And then I let it know that the above was just an example. And now I get to the part where I actually wanted to, I'm giving it the information for the course that I wanted to generate learning outcomes for. And here we have, we give a course name and a course description and ask it to come up with those learning outcomes. And again, similar to as before, it is, it's just trying to provide me with just the learning outcomes. I don't know if everyone noticed, but so in my first prompt here, I just asked, a question and I didn't have any kind of leading response and it responded in a more personal manner. But in this example here, this learning outcomes colon is part of my prompt. So I've given it sort of the start of its response. And what it's done is it's just given me a numbered list. So that's if you're finding that it's really chatty, there are techniques you can use to kind of cut down on that and really just have it give you the information that you're looking for. And then in Gemini, again, a similar sort of thing where I've given it that larger prompt and it's come back to me with, a set of learning outcomes for that course.
Yeah, so I would reinforce what Brian said. It's useful, I find, to use at least a couple of different of these models, even if both are giving you kind of what you want. It's kind of informative to see the difference, and one might give you something that the other one doesn't. The example I want to move to now is a more special purpose tool. What Brian has shown you from ChatGPT, Gemini, and so forth are going to the general purpose large language models themselves, putting in prompts and having a back and forth with them to get the output you want. We are going to see, and we are seeing already, built on top of that, a variety of very more specialized tools. One that I came across quite early in the work with the FACT2 AI task group was this almanac.ai, which basically you can give it a topic, a course title, and a level, and it will provide you a unit structure for that course, lessons, lesson plans, even have the ability to create resources for that class. So it is, very much more specialized. I find it as, I think it's most useful as a brainstorming aid. And we'll see in a minute how that might work. But it's useful in that you can provide a very simple prompt. It knows that what you're looking for is a course design involving representative units that would make up that course, what would be typical kind of learning outcomes that you would find for each of those units and so forth. So let me escape out of here. So it's just at almanac.ai. I'm going to go to the courses tab just to give you an idea. For example, I'm back in the classroom this summer for the first time in a few years. I'm going to be teaching my course for Search for Life in the Universe. And so I'm going to use that as the framework for my bits of the webinar this afternoon. So early on, I just went to Almanac and said, this is an astrobiology course. It is a freshman level college course for non-science majors. Please generate, you don't have to say, you just give it the title and the level, and it will generate. Basically, here's what it thinks the units for a non-majors introductory astrobiology course should be. So there is Introduction to Astrobiology, Origin of Life, Habitable Zone, Extreme Life Forms, Drake Equation, Astrobiology. And for each of those, there are lessons that it begins. You can generate more lessons either through more application of AI processing or by adding them in yourselves. And so I will say, I mean, I've taught my Search for Life in the Universe class a number of times, and this organization of units is not necessarily the organization of units that I would use. But on the other hand, I also was reading an article in the New York Times about various geoengineering approaches to climate change. And I'm thinking, well, I'm not teaching a geoengineering course, but if I plug that in for an upper level majors course in geoengineering, what would I get? And there's again introduction, solar radiation management, carbon dioxide removal, ocean-based geoengineering, engineering the climate. So if I were teaching this course for the first time, this would be very, very useful for me. What I would say in terms of my astrobiology course is that it is very much focused on search for life beyond our solar system. That's what the Drake equation, Fermi paradox, exoplanets, search for extraterrestrial intelligence is all about. This is basically 1/3 of my course. I also spend a lot of time looking at how we have searched for life within our solar system, Mars, the moons of Jupiter and Saturn. And I was originally disappointed not to see those show up, but then when I dug down a little bit deeper, it's got astrobiology and space exploration, and there's Mars, and there's moons of Jupiter and Saturn. So it's there, organized in a different way. I, in the past, haven't really covered astrobiology and popular culture and ethical and philosophical implications as much. But going through this exercise is me thinking, well, this is a course for non-majors. Maybe I should really kind of rethink this and see, are there ways for me to bring in more of this content to engage my students? So, even for a course that I've done a number of times, I find it useful for this brainstorming kind of approach. So let me just dig in a little bit deeper here. Origin of life, for example. It will come in here, and if you by default, it has come up with these various lesson plans. Early Earth and the Miller-Urey experiment, RNA world and the origin of self-replicating molecules. I mean, this is certainly a lesson that I've used in my course in the past. When it develops these lessons, you can say, okay, well, help me plan this lesson. And it will create a set of learning objectives based on basically a very large sample of course descriptions, syllabi, and so forth, and other materials that have been put out onto the web. You can edit these. You can create lesson plans. By default, when you go to create a lesson plan for this lesson, it will select backwards design as the kind of instructional design background, where you've got the desired results, the assessment evidence, and the learning plan. But if you don't want to use that, there are a variety of other conceptual models like the 5E model. Some of these instructional design models are maybe a little bit more targeted to K-12, but certainly when I work with faculty on designing their courses, we focus a lot on backwards design. And so if we add those headings, you'll basically get I may not take the time to actually crank through this. You can here we go. Under desired results, here are some examples of the desired results that you might consider as part of this lesson plan. Here are examples of assessment evidence that you might consider and so forth. So this specialized tool takes you from a course title through course structure, lessons, units, lessons, lesson plans. And when I first came across the tool, well, you can still use it to develop resources for that particular lesson. But when I first came across the tool, none of these were, restricted to the Pro edition. I'm just demoing the free version. So, you can use it to develop rubrics, to develop interview questions around this lesson, to give some prompts for conceptual thinking. But the Pro version will also recommend videos that you might incorporate as resources for that, or will generate content for a slide deck of the kind of topics that you would want to cover in this lesson, and actually give you the initial backbone of a slide deck for your any kind of presentation you want to make around it. So that's Almanac. It's not it's not necessarily the only specialized tool in this area. You can use it as I said, in this kind of brainstorming format. It is a rapidly changing landscape with all these tools. As I said, when I came across this tool a few months back, it was just free. Now there's a free and a paid level, but it's a good way to jumpstart your process, especially on a new course. But because it's got that structure built in, it is more constrained. And don't see a lot in the chat yet, but yeah. So we'll get back to some of those. Yeah. And we'll save the chat as well once we finish up the session. So that's kind of a top level view of how to get started on delving into building your course. The remaining examples are more of the bits and pieces. So one of the things that I find very important these days is developing question banks for formative assessment. It used to be I went for probably decades without asking my students any multiple choice questions because I didn't really think that they were so much authentic assessment. But with more of a focus on working with students online and making sure that they're engaging with the reading and so forth, I've gotten very much more into using a lot of low stakes quizzes over the reading materials that students can take multiple times, getting a different set of randomly generated questions each time. For that to be effective, I have to have a whole lot of questions that are targeted at the topics that we're covering, and especially at the specific resources, the readings, the websites, and so forth that I'm having my students look at. And it takes me forever to write a multiple choice question. So these large language models are a great aid to us as faculty in developing multiple choice questions. You can create questions on a general topic, and I'll show you a prompt for that, but also you can point the large language models to analyze specific course resources that you're having your students look at. Brian's already mentioned different levels of Bloom's taxonomy. You can get multiple choice questions developed at both low level and high level learning skills. And like I say, having a huge bank of these questions around course materials allows me to really provide a lot of opportunities for students to self-test to make sure that they understand the reading. And so I won't take the time to look through all these, but here's a prompt that is not directed at any particular course reading material. If I'm doing a as a professor of an introductory course on astrobiology for non-majors. So again, giving the AI model an understanding of the role that it's playing. Please generate 10 multiple choice questions with correct answers identified that will assess student understanding of the properties of light. I'm not pointing at that at any particular course resource. Understanding the properties of life is just so general that I can rely on the AI model to generate a set of potential questions for me to look through um, for inclusion in my test bank on that topic. This is a little bit more directed. Please write 10 multiple choice questions based on the content at this web page, which is one of the ones I have my students read, even though it is somewhat dated. It provides a good introductory overview, targeted at the remembering level of Bloom's taxonomy, and provide the correct answer for each. So you have to realize that some of the large language models will have access to the internet, some will not. And so I tend to use Claude and Gemini. Gemini has access to the internet. The version of Claude that I'm using does not. So when I ran this prompt through Claude, I basically saved the content of this web page into a Word document and attached that Word document to my prompt, and Claude was able to generate questions. So just let me come over here to, let's say, Gemini, and here's some astrobiology basics questions. So here is, please write 10 multiple choice questions based on the content of this webpage, targeted at the remembering level. And so if you look through these questions, they are very much just kind of straight recall. And frankly, I would not use all of these. I would throw some of them out because they just don't meet the quality of what I want in my my test bank. But here are the questions. Here are the correct answers. And here is the website that was reviewed. If you can get this back, if you can get 10 or 20 or 30 questions back in 3 seconds and then spend some time going through them rather than spending 3 hours writing questions, I think that's a win. Now, please provide 10 multiple choice questions based on the same web page, but at the analysis level of Bloom's taxonomy. Think about what I did not include in my prompt here. So here are questions that are over the same material, but they require students to make connections between different parts of the reading, or to analyze, or to make connections with other outside knowledge. Gemini came back with only 5 of these rather than the 10 I asked for. And because I did not ask for the correct answer, Gemini also did not give me the correct answer. So you have to be very, very clear about what you're asking from the models. And I don't think I'll take the time to go through the Claude responses. Let me stop sharing, Brian, and you can go on, I think, at this point to talk about the Brightspace tools.
Yes, one moment here. Okay. So I wanted to start by talking about, or I wanted to kind of talk about what we're doing at D2L and what we're doing with Brightspace. So we currently have a beta program underway around using generative AI. And the first couple of features that we have released in that beta are generating formative assessments for use inside of your content, and that's via our Creator Plus package, and also generating quiz questions based on course content and Bloom's taxonomy. I'll do a little demo of both of those. And then we're also in the next couple of months, we'll be releasing an idea generator for assignments and discussions. And again, in both those cases, you'll be able to tie it to a level of Bloom's taxonomy. So the first thing that I'll show you is the generating practice questions inside of content. So here I have a content topic on the introduction to microeconomic concepts, and I'm going to add a knowledge check into my course here. So from the menu here, I can select insert practice, and oh dear, one second. So the site that I was using was part of the beta, but it seems that it has been kicked out of the beta for some reason. So let me just find another site. You know what? Actually, what I'll do is I'll shift instead to showing you the generating quiz questions, also based on course content that you have within Brightspace. So I'm going to share. So here I have a short video that goes through it. And so in order to access this capability, first you go into the quizzes and you go to your question library. You can actually add these questions at any level of your question library. And what you do is first you select a topic within your course that you're going to use as the basis for for the questions that can be generated, and you can specify a number of questions that you want to generate at once. So we'll click on the generate. I'll skip ahead slightly. And one of the things that we believe is important is to have that human validation of the content that's being generated from these large language models. And part of that is what we've done here is we've incorporated a review, like an easy review process into this question generation. So it's shown me that at first when it first creates the questions, it has created 3 for me, and the current status is not reviewed. I can then go through each of those questions, read them over. I can make adjustments if I want to, and I can decide whether I want to keep them, discard them, or just kind of move on to the next case. And what I've done through that process is I've accepted 2, I rejected 1, and it's given me sort of the remaining ones listed here. And what I can do with that is I can then add them to my course. And when the question library loads again, and I go into the section that I was in, we'll see at the bottom the questions that I added are in fact there. With the idea with the inserting practices into content behaves in a similar way, except that instead of going to your question library, we're starting from. No, sorry, we're starting from within the content itself, and I can select where in the course, where in that content I want to have the practice, and I can also select the portion of that particular content topic that I want to use. So I can base it on the contents of the entire topic, or it can be just on a paragraph, or on sort of half the page. It's really within my control to limit it to what I want it to the question to be based off of. So apologies that I don't have that to share or to be able to show you in person, but if there's more questions, I can answer that at the end. Back to you, Keith.
Okay, let me get back into the presentation. So we just have a few idea or a few topics here that, again, I think what we can do in the webinar here is just hopefully spur ideas for you to think about parts of what you do when you are designing, developing, fleshing out a course, and where along those processes that various AI tools might help out. In terms of lesson plans, I already showed briefly, although not in any great depth, the ability to do lesson planning within Almanac. But you can go to any of the large language models and just provide the kind of framework that you want and get ideas about the lesson plan out. And again, these outputs that you're going to get, I don't think we have to worry about them replacing us at any time soon, but they are perhaps useful for you to, when I'm writing, I don't like to have a blank page. And the way I use AI models most effectively is just to give me something to start working against. So here, again, going back to my Search for Life in the Universe course, I've got examples of 2 different levels of prompts. Please create a 100-minute lesson plan on the potential for life on Venus for an introductory astrobiology course. A very generic kind of lesson plan prompt. You're specifying, how long. We have 100-minute lectures at purchase. What's the topic? What is the framework? This is for an introductory astrobiology course. As opposed to, you're the professor of a freshman level course for non-majors on astrobiology, created a lesson plan on the topic potential for life in the atmosphere of Venus. Lesson should cover, environmental conditions, habitability, extremophiles, and so forth. And again, 100 minutes long. Let me just show you a couple of different outputs. We go to Claude. Potential for life in, let's see here. So here is a proposed lesson plan. I basically just gave the prompt that I just discussed in the slide. And based on, shall we say, Claude's analysis of all of the ingested content that has gone into training Claude, they've come up with, for this topic, here's a reasonable breakdown of a sequence of things that you'll probably want to cover in this 100-minute time period. An introduction to the atmosphere, and here's some things to cover. The different cloud layers, which I will tell you is quite important to this discussion of potential for life in the atmosphere of Venus. Claude knows that because the atmosphere of Venus is very acidic, that the kind of extremophile organism on Earth that you'd want to think about are acidophiles and organisms that can sustain life at high temperatures and so forth. So it lays this out. Quite useful. I mean, I would use that as a starting point. Gemini, if we go to this one. Yep, so this is the same comparable one in Gemini. Gemini is a bit chattier, as Brian mentioned. Some of the language models are chatty. Today we're venturing. So it gives an overview, and gives you an overview that you can provide to your students. It sets out the learning objectives. Here's a 100-minute lesson plan for the introduction. Here's the hook that you want to use to get your students' interest and have them do some brainstorming. And then you do a presentation, flip into a discussion, and so forth. So I've run through ideas for lesson plans for several different topics through Claude and Gemini. And I would say that even though I more regularly go to Claude for more general interactions with the language model, I find that Gemini does a little bit better job of framing things in a more productive lesson plan kind of way. The other thing about Gemini, if you want to, you can take the content from Gemini and then export it to Google Docs. In this case, this will go just into a standard doc because it's going to fit into a Word document kind of format. So that's again, just some ideas to get you thinking about different steps of where you might benefit from having an intelligent assistant, essentially, as you're designing your course. Rubrics is another one, and just go through this quickly. So we'll have some time for questions at the end. Please provide an analytical rubric for a digital storytelling project in an introductory astrobiology course where students must select a current topic in astrobiology and record a voice-thread presentation describing the highlights of the curriculum. Now, as you're thinking about rubrics, here are some things that you might want to keep in mind. Did you want to specify the rubrics, the criteria for, especially when you're dealing with analytic rubrics? Actually, your first question is probably, do you want to do an analytic or holistic rubric? If you're doing an analytic rubric, do you want to tell the AI model what criteria you want to include in the rubric, or do you want to give it free rein to suggest criteria? And then I actually like the latter approach to see what criteria it's going to suggest, because then it might pull up some criteria I didn't think about, or phrasing criteria in ways that I didn't. You can always go back and forth with the model and say, okay, that rubric was good, except I'm not interested in scoring technical proficiency on the presentation. So how would you redo the rubric without including that criterion? So you can go back and forth with the models. Just to give you a quick, we go back here for Claude, for example, digital storytelling rubric. I first asked for an analytical rubric for both Claude and Gemini, and you can see topic selection, content depth, clarity of explanation. What takes me forever in writing a rubric is just having to write all of these descriptions of the different areas. So, having it come up with here are criteria, and here are some different ways of framing how you might describe above expectations, meet expectations, and so forth. Same thing with Gemini. If we come back here to the rubric, the criteria are a little bit different: content accuracy, content depth, clarity and delivery, visual storytelling elements, technical proficiency, engagement, and comes up with a grading scale and some additional things to consider. If instead you want a holistic rubric, it's not going to have the criteria specified out with explicitly different levels, but we'll say, okay, let's say actually Claude I think does a little bit better analytical rubric or a holistic rubric. Okay, so here is the rubric for a 5-point scale. We're not breaking this down by different criteria. An excellent one is going to demonstrate all of these different aspects, which will include some of a bit about the selection of the topic, the presentation, is there a logical flow, and so forth. So rubrics, I encourage my faculty to think about how they can use rubrics to provide a more structured experience for their students, but generating them can be a real pain, especially if you don't like to put together all that verbiage. Verbiage is what these general models are great at. And then maybe one last topic. Which is how we can use AI tools to support our own research, whether it's for our teaching our classes or for our scholarship. You know, as Brian mentioned earlier, and as many of you are probably aware of, you need to be careful about getting citations and other sources from a general model like ChatGPT. As Brian said, if you ask ChatGPT something, it will give you an answer, but that answer might be an hallucination. And so even if you're getting valid information out from ChatGPT on a research topic, because so many different sources have been combined together to train ChatGPT, it's very difficult to track down any specific point in the output that you're getting from ChatGPT to a specific scholarly source. And so here, I think in particular is a good place where special purpose tools can play a role. And the one that I came across early in my work on AI this past year that I've seen mentioned in a number of other places is elicit.org. And so let me just show you what that looks like. When I first started sharing Elicit with faculty, I said it was kind of like Google Scholar on steroids. I won't do a live demo because that did not work out real well on Tuesday, but I have, I've done a literature search for the same topic that I had Claude and Gemini write lesson plans for, the potential for life in the atmosphere of Venus, for example. And so you basically ask a prompt, and if I were doing this live, what you would see is it would process for a little bit. It's going through a database of real papers. These are not hallucinations. It would come up with, and you would see this list along the left side being populated of different sources. They will kind of bubble up, and Elicit will end up with a list of relevant papers that go down. You can load more. It will give you the citation, and it will give you an abstract, an AI generated summary of the abstract. From the top 4 papers, or the top 8 if you pay for the pro model, it will synthesize those summaries to come up with a summary of those top 4 papers. Give you a little bit of a narrative overview of the field of research or scholarship that you've asked for. You've asked for sources to be identified for. You have the ability in this table here, you will initially get paper and abstract summary, but if you want to add main findings, you can come over to this list of additional columns, and you can have the AI tool summarize the main finding, which is going to be different than a summary of the abstract. If you are interested in having the AI list for each of these papers that it has brought back, you want to list what the key aspects of the methodology are, you can just add that column, and you'll get a new column in here where it will go through each of the returned papers and give a little summary of the methodology. So quite a very useful tool for doing some initial screening of a set of papers. Then you have the ability to chat with those papers. And so if you take the top 4, for example, papers, and my query here said nothing about the gas phosphine, which is a big part of the story about life on Venus in current research. And it said, so I'll chat with those papers. It's like, okay, I've got those 4 papers sitting on the shelf there, and let's have a conversation. So how has the proposed detection of phosphine discussed in these, how is it discussed in these papers? Do these papers find the proposed phosphine detection to be credible? And so it will go through and provide basically the perspective on this chat question from the perspective of the papers. There are other tools. You can ask new questions to find new papers to bring into this notebook. You can extract data from papers that you've uploaded. You can get a list of concepts and so forth. So this is a much more interactive way of, I mean, I could go to Google Scholar, I could type in a topic and I would get a list of papers, and then I have to figure out what to do with it. This is a little bit more interactive and a much more, provides much more of a textual analysis of the papers than you would get just by doing a Google Scholar search. And so there are other tools, Semantic Scholar site, consensus.app. I haven't played around with these as much. Zotero and Mendeley, if you use either of those for managing your reference library, as far as I can tell, neither one of them currently have AI tools built in. But Zotero, I think, has a plugin for ChatGPT, and Mendeley might be working on the same lines as well. So we're running to the end of our time. Here is our contact information. And again, please do register for the FACT2 AI Symposium. Let me go ahead and copy that and put it into the chat. And and we are just about out of time. Certainly, I can hang around for a little bit. I don't know what Brian's schedule is, but I want to thank everyone who showed up this afternoon. We had again another great turnout, a lot of good discussions in the chat, and we will share around these slides. You'll have our contact information if there's anything else, anything you want to follow up with. I know, Brian, do you have any last comments?
No, just thank you for the opportunity to share information and some of the things that Brightspace is doing and that Detail is doing with Brightspace. And I hope that you have found this both helpful and informative.
Good. And it's Friday afternoon, everyone, so have a good weekend. Hey, Jeffrey.
Great work, Keith.
Thanks.
Brian.